Good morning, and thank you so much to KAIST and Professor Park and the whole team for this event, which is going to be very exciting. So I'm looking forward to spending the whole day with you all on this intersection of AI and development and where we are. So as Professor Lee introduced me, I'm a professor at Columbia SIPA, the School of International Public Affairs. I work as a consultant for many donors and clients, and I want to bring some of those experiences from both sides to the next 15 minutes or so on where I think the challenge, where we are in terms of the challenges. I already wrote down some of the things that Professor Park Kyung noted in the opening remarks around where we are at a period of opportunity but also uncertainty. I also just want to clarify that in this session I want to focus on generative AI because that is what a lot of us are discussing right now. And as Professor Lee said, Hee-Jun Lee said, this is more of a provocation rather than a presentation, so I welcome any questions. And why am I interested in this topic about where we are? I think it's because there is so much discussion around the value of generative AI in improving efficiency and empowerment, the narrative of development and this techno-optimism, and it's set against a sector which is in flux right now, right? The year that has probably faced the biggest budget cuts ever with the dissolution of USAID, but also bilateral funding, and simultaneously the expansion of AI around the world and AI partnerships. And I want to bring into context, I'm a qualitative researcher, so I love examples and stories, so I want to bring in some of the consultancy requests I'm getting to show you where the sector is, what the thinking is around AI, but also from my teaching, what this means for students as they are graduating into this exciting but uncertain space where AI is their competitor, effectively. So the question is then, will generative AI empower development professionals or those in the social sector, or is it going to eradicate knowledge and skills? I think that's what a lot of us are asking right now. By way of background, I want to say that I come from the longer history of what used to be called ICTD, as some of us here. And I've mostly worked in the digital inclusion space, so digital and gender inclusion. And the photos on the right are a slight, introduction to my work. So the top left is my PhD work on community radio in India, which was funded by Microsoft Research. But since then, I worked with a number of clients, including the ones listed here. The photo on the far right is research for M-KOPA and M-Pesa in Kenya on small business entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs, and how they use mobile money. I'm also part of the Merltech initiative, which I mentioned is a consultancy, so I want to bring in some of those examples now, and lead the Inclusive AI Lab, which is run out of the Netherlands. And the photo on the far right is, it's not very clear on here, but it is graduation day at Columbia. I know many of us have experienced this either as professors or teachers, or professors or students or both. But I think I also want to place this in the context of where are we going in terms of educators and students who are studying international development in this age of AI, right? So all this to say that I'm bringing my previous questions around digital divides, digital inclusion, which Kyung had also referred to, and taking them into how it translates to generative AI. So, as you know, many of us know, and we can see also from the publications that are circulating right now, the reports that the team has shared, the development sector and the social sector is very, very focused on generative AI right now, and what this means for all of us. It's seen as this sea change, a paradigm shift, etc. The top 3 links here are just examples, just 3 challenge funds or innovation funds that are working right now in the sector. So the Gates Foundation has something right now called it's been running for a while, the Grand Challenges Fund, but the last one was specifically on AI and health. GSMA, the Mobile Operator Consortium, has a fund called the Innovation Fund for Impactful AI, and I was involved in setting up the monitoring and evaluation framework for that. And the GitLab Foundation, if any of you are interested, is just accepting applications for startups for demonstrating AI and economic opportunity. But the last link is actually the one where some of the questions are arising. So on each table, there is a printout of the study of AI use in the philanthropic sector on the center of your tables. I'm not connected with the paper or the research, but I thought it was very interesting. There were very interesting findings with around 800 development organizations and philanthropic organizations around where they feel the sector is heading. And one of the key headings in that report is widespread use, widespread concerns. Similarly, there was a study of Indian NGOs, and I know these quotes are too small to read, but the main benefits that were seen of generative AI use in the NGOs in India were around three aspects. One was around scale, so talking about how you achieve efficiency at scale, how do you reach more people with minimal cost. The second was around synthesis, so gathering insights equally from different stakeholders and then being able to synthesize the knowledge from that. And the last was around personalization, which, again, many of us are probably experiencing. This is also particularly the case in EdTech and EdTech organizations and initiatives where they like the use of generative AI and chatbots to personalize your experience, right? But I don't know if any of you also came across this earlier in the year in October, where Deloitte as a management consultancy was fined by the Australian government and asked to pay back their money because they were accused, some of you are nodding, because they were accused of hallucination and fabrication of data. And this is every consultancy and every organization's nightmare, right? Because it's not just about money, it's reputational risk that you're not seen as producing credible content and work. So again, going back to that report that you've got, I think one of the questions is there's a real aspect of this fear of missing out that many organizations are implementing AI, but they're really, even though they have many concerns like misinformation, data security, lack of expertise, and even, of course, in our sector around bias, biased algorithms and discrimination. Even though all these concerns are there, everybody still has that question around, well, how can we use AI for this? And it's not surprising given that there is so much excitement around the space and so much money and funding, et cetera. So as an example, here are some of the consultancy requests I get. So the first one is, I had a request from the government of Canada where they wanted to use ChatGPT to understand the gender content that might be missing from their reports. And it was a really fun study. I got to play around with ChatGPT. This is a link to it, which when we circulate the slides, you'll also have. The second one was from the Gates Foundation, which was, we contract a lot of consultants to do literature reviews for us, but how about we outsource it to generative AI? So can you give us an LLM prompt that our staff can just use, and they can look for peer-reviewed papers on impact of AI and AI evaluations. And as you can imagine, that was a very tense request, even from them, because that implied that they were concerned that at some point, even their own jobs might be at risk because the work that they're doing could be done by an LLM. And then the last one, I think there are a few folks here from the World Bank, but the last one was around from the MEL team, the monitoring and evaluation team called the Independent Evaluation Group at the World Bank, where they're very aware that many of their staff, including their junior staff, especially their junior staff, are using AI for their work, despite broad organizational policies, but they don't know how to deal with that. So they want a credible, honest AI policy where they acknowledge that their staff are using AI rather than banning them from using it. And they wanted help on what that looks like. So this is where we are, right? I feel that we're at this center of these interlocking circles where there's this surge in generative AI investment, constant partnerships. Every day you hear an announcement from Anthropic, OpenAI about partnering with a country, partnering with an education institution, with nonprofits. If you haven't read Karen Howe's book, Empire of AI, the message of neocolonialism is very strong, right, in it. But at the same time, like I said, major ODA cuts, The USAID funding cut was, I was looking it up, it was around $55 to $60 billion of funding gone, development aid gone, and bilaterals as well, including the government of Korea, right, about 15 to 20% funding cuts, and which means workforce contractions across NGOs. And then, so why am I talking about eradication? I'm saying this because there's this fear of being left behind, but people don't know what they're being left behind of. What is the knowledge that they're missing? And at the same time, there's this concern around decline of critical thinking, analytical autonomy. Are we capturing the right knowledge in the data sets? And what does that mean if there's an erasure of indigenous knowledge? So pre-generative AI, we might have these kind of methods where we are gathering knowledge from lots of different sources, where we have that narrowing of the first triangle is that critical thinking perspective, and we have multiple perspectives. But post-generative AI, sometimes it feels like it's just a flat block. Everybody's putting the same query in, and we're all getting the same result out. And the word I've been thinking about a lot is called epistemicide, which is the destruction of knowledge systems, particular variety of knowledge systems. And we arrive at this juncture of a single source of truth. And there was recently a paper which said, why does AI write like that? And some of the examples, as you know, is that language around it's not just this, it's also that, or the M dash, which is being questioned. So then the question is, where is the diversity in the world? Where are we going? So Stefan Verhulst at the GovLab in NYU has a very interesting perspective where he says, okay, AI is here to stay, generative AI is here to stay, but what we need to do is we need to ask better questions and still have our critical thinking. So he has a very nice phrase called inquiry as infrastructure. But what does this mean in reality, right? So one of my consultancies is with MasterCard Foundation. They have a project called Youth Livelihoods, Future of Livelihoods. And I'm leading this group of 7 PhD students, all women PhD students who are registered at African universities. All their topics are on AI and livelihoods. But I'll give you an example. There is one woman whose topic is on screenwriting, and she wants to criticize the fact that Cameroonian screenwriters and women screenwriters are losing their cultural context because they're using AI to write. So they will put a prompt in, and then it'll generate a script. But guess what? The irony is, her whole chapter is, she uses AI to write the chapter. So when I got the chapter, I said, this doesn't sound like your voice. And she said, yeah, no, it sounded better. And similarly, another student, her topic is on dependence on AI in Nigerian universities, and what does it mean in weakening African youth for the future workplace. But again, she uses AI to write. So a lot of our work together with that group has been the irony of we're critiquing AI, but we're working with AI, right? So where are we? And when I consistently ask them why do you do this? Not in a bad way, but just not judging, but just curiosity. The response I always get is it sounds so much better. It sounds polished. And you get different variations, like English is not my first language, or it sounds great, etc. So then we're at this crossroads, right, of empowerment versus eradication. So we're talking about productivity by using AI, efficiency, etc. But we are also talking about skill erosion, not just people who work in the development sector, but also the end users who are the beneficiaries of development. And then we have the contradiction between knowledge inclusion, what do we capture in AI data sets, because we know that they will be used going forward, but how do we also make sure that entire knowledge systems, indigenous systems, are not being erased, and this question of epistemicide. And then, there's a phrase in English which is called, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? And I don't know if this is correct in Korean, but I used AI as a test to see if it captured the knowledge. So I don't know if this is real, but I think it's something like a carpenter keeps sharpening the saw. So tell me if this is true, because I want to know, again, talking about including cultural knowledge, if this is correct. But essentially what my point I want to make, and I think if we can keep this as the provocation throughout the day, is where are these three elements around policy, inclusion, capacity, and critical thinking in terms of how we approach AI in the development industry as this very critical point of where we are in the world today. And I want to close with, there's a beautiful film on Netflix right now, and I saw that it was available in Korea as well when I checked Netflix here. It's called Humans in the Loop. It's a fiction film. It's not a documentary, but it's based off something real. A data labeler who is a tribal woman in Jharkhand state in India. And this photo is also her relationship with her boss, who is the quality controller. And there's a beautiful example of she labels a caterpillar. One of the requests she gets is to label a caterpillar. And she gets feedback from her clients in the US who are shown as this kind of anonymous behind the cameras off on Zoom meeting. And they criticize her because they say that this is a pest. And she says, no, it's not a pest. It's a very good creature because it eats other insects, it eats dead leaves. And I thought it was such an interesting question around how do we capture knowledge and whose knowledge it is. And there was a beautiful quote that the director had in as he was talking about the film, and he says, if you're talking about AI as a child, where we are giving all this knowledge so it continues reproducing the knowledge, he says, we are custodians of the knowledge that this planet has. Then what are the ideas and the knowledge systems that we are passing on? Is it just the Eurocentric gaze, or can it be a bold and diverse gaze? And we know that in development, these are not new tensions around whose reality counts, whose knowledge counts. Robert Chambers brought that in the 1970s. But I think what the difference with generative AI is that it magnifies these tensions at a scale that we had never anticipated before. And that is what I'd like us to think about today.